Welcome to the 4x4 Canada podcast. I'm your host, Wes, and we are tonight talking with Ray and Marianne from the BC Overland Rally. It is an incredible event. We'll get into it. I went for the first time last year and I had an absolute blast. And there's many reasons why people keep on coming back to it, and we'll get into that in a second. Unfortunately, we are without Trisha tonight. She has to work tonight. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us, but we will have her back next week, I believe. If you haven't heard the interview from last week, go back and listen to With Finding Life's Moments, a couple from British Columbia. They're traveling around British Columbia in their Toyota Tacoma. A couple of empty nesters that are just surviving and loving life. And I just can't believe how good their title of their YouTube channel and their Instagram channel, Finding Life's Moments. That's what it's all about for all of us, right? And that's just it's such a great name. And I really recommend you go and check them out on YouTube and Instagram as well. If you haven't heard the episode where I did the interview with them, go back and check it out from last week. We had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, and just talk about finding life's moments, basically. Tonight, we have Ray and Marianne from BC Overland Rally. Welcome to the 4x4 Canada podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited about this one. I've been looking forward to talking to you guys for a while, not only because of the whole BC Overland Rally, but you guys have been around the world, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, figuratively and literally, and not in probably the greatest choice of vehicles at times. Definitely have a few stories that have come out of that. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about the BC Overland Rally first of all, but I do want to maybe mention some of your trips because you guys were overlanding when overlanding wasn't overlanding kind of idea, right? So you guys have been there right from the beginning. And part of that passion, I think, for the overlanding is what brought this whole BC Overland Rally as well as your Washington event, right? Maybe if you can give our listeners a quick elevator pitch about what the BC Overland Rally is. There's a lot more to it, but if you can explain in your own words what the BC Overland Rally is all about.
Okay. Sometimes I think we use the phrase festival sometimes loosely these days, and festivals become a dirty word in certain circles. But people think when we talk about an overland rally, they think we're racing off into the woods somewhere. But really, it's more like a festival environment. It's a family-friendly camping get-together for a 4-day weekend. And it's just people who come year after year, they say it feels more like a family reunion than going to a show. And that's always been the feeling we've striven for. We've always wanted to make sure that people come and have a great time and meet lots of other people and really relax and take it easy and learn some stuff while you're there, but that's not the objective. We have a motto for the rallies, which is have fun, make friends, learn stuff, in that order. So it's all about having fun and making new friends. And if you happen to learn something useful while you're there, then that's really cool. But that's not necessarily the reason why people come.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I've got a lot of friends who have been going right from the Harrison days, the very beginning, and they just keep on going back. And a lot of them are meeting their friends there. Their friends might be coming down from Prince George, and one guy's in Kamloops, one guy's in Kelowna, and one guy's in Coquitlam kind of idea, right? And this is a yearly thing for them to get together and, like you mentioned, have fun, meet new people, and learn a bit of stuff. It's, as you mentioned, more of a festival kind of idea. You've got vendors. We'll get into all of this later on, but you've got a great courses and demonstrations. There's trail rides. There's the course put on with the Four-Wheel Drive Association with their driver training. And of course, the nightly light with the nightly night. That's a hard one to say for some reason. the nightly fire with the giveaways and stuff like that. But the giveaways are cool, but also the speeches that are given by your guest speakers. You have some incredible speakers out. So it's a whole combination of things. And if you're not careful, your head just spins around sometimes because there's lots of stuff happening. But the biggest thing is it's fun, right? It's a community thing. I think that's what a lot of people have found.
Yeah. And I think we try to figure out how do we have a fun spin on everything that we do. Sometimes overlanding can get a little too serious.
Yeah,
I think Matt Scott from Max Tracks, he probably put it best one time when he said, I just don't understand why I need to dress like the lion tamer to go camping. But we can take ourselves a little too seriously sometimes. And it's good for us to just recognize that this is not rocket science. We're not saving the world here. We're not curing cancer. We're just going camping and we're having a lot of fun while we do it. And yeah, like we're going into some remote areas sometimes, and everybody can definitely gain from picking up some skills, whether it's driving your truck a little better or figuring out how to repair a tire or doing a photography class or paddleboarding or whatever you're into. And we have a ton of different instructors come every year, volunteer their time, and that's a lot of fun. But even things like campfire cooking. You could have a campfire cooking class, which is very serious. But we decided last year that the campfire, we're going to make it a competition, and we turned it into the ultimate grilled cheese sandwich competition. And we had people making these ridiculous gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches on their camping stoves, and everybody took the competition really seriously, and we had a ton of fun. And I think that's the point of it, is we're out there, we're doing cool things, and we're having fun while we're doing it.
It was funny you mentioned that the grilled cheese cooking competition. I was sitting around the campfire Friday night around in a camping area with one of the propane pits with Chris Walker from Overland Training Canada and Richard Sheridan from Freedom Recovery Gear. And there was a heated debate going on about how these guys are going to do these grilled cheese sandwiches. And there's a couple of other guys, Jordy and a few other guys are sitting around there, and Nick McKay, another volunteer of yours. And these guys are getting right into it. How I've never seen such an in-depth conversation about grilled cheese sandwiches around a campfire before. Like it was.
Nick actually deep fried his. It was almost like a grilled cheese pocket that he made, and he brought his own dough and he put the grilled cheese in and a bunch of other seasonings, and then he rolled it into a little dough packet, and then he deep fried them and then tossed them on the grill to crush them almost like smashed potatoes.
Yeah.
And then put some topping on it. The innovation that we saw on something as simple as who can make the best grilled cheese sandwich at the campfire was fantastic. People just had a ton of fun with it. So yeah, and I love it. I love the fact that everybody comes to these things and we can pick the most ridiculous topic at times, and everybody just embraces it and just goes to town. At the Washington State event last year, we had a survival class for little kids. And we had a bunch of veterans who were teaching this class. And the class idea was, you've got a black Glad garbage bag with you and you're lost in the woods. And all of the ways you can use this Glad garbage bag to save your life while you're stuck in the woods for a couple of days. And these little kids, they had a blast. They were pooling their resources. They were building complicated lean-to shelters in the woods, and they were making like little tuxedos for themselves. And it was just ridiculous. It was a ton of fun. So yeah, it's a lot of fun when we get to do that kind of stuff.
That's something that even adults could do. That's actually something for our listeners. If you're sitting around, you're camping for a couple of days and you get bored or whatever it is, break out some of those black garbage bags and see what you can figure out yourself, right? Because I can bet you a lot of the kids' ideas are better than some of the adults.
Oh, they were like digging pits and lining them with water to capture dew and rainwater, and they were making little sleeping bags for themselves. And they have the advantage, a little tiny kid can completely fit into one of those black garbage bags, which is not necessarily a good thing. You need a little bit of adult supervision there just in case. But yeah, it was pretty fun to see them all really thinking hard about what they could do.
Yeah, definitely. So is the grilled cheese sandwich contest coming back this year, or do we have something different?
It's currently on the schedule. We may mix it up a little bit. We try not to have the final schedule fixed in stone until just a couple of weeks before the event. Everything is pretty fluid, and everybody who comes to the show and donates their time, they all have day jobs. And so we're never quite sure. Somebody who might be, oh yeah, I volunteered to run that class. And then the week before the class, they're like, oh, I'm on deployment, or my boss is sending me to wherever. And then we have to scramble and fill in a few holes. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think that one's probably going to be coming back.
If you need another judge, let me know. So this year we're going to a new location just outside of Kelowna. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that new location.
Sure. I'll just back it up a little bit. If you look at the history of the rally so far, this would basically be, it's 8 years since we started the BC Overland Rally series. So we did 2 years at the Sasquatch Resort in Agassiz, close to Harrison there. And that was a fantastic little spot, but we outgrew it. And then we moved to Whistler, and we did a 1 year at the Whistler Olympic Park. And between Sasquatch Resort and Whistler, we realized that the challenge with having an event in the mountains is that it's a slope. Everything is slope. It's hard to camp on the side of the mountain. And the only place you can really camp is there's a few little meadows and there's some parking lots. And then, of course, we got hit by a couple of years of COVID there. But then we came back a couple of years ago and we moved to Merritt. And Merritt was a cool little town. We were really excited about that. But unfortunately, just before the rally season, they had that epic one in a couple 100-year flood, and it flooded the whole area. And after a couple of years, they're still dealing with all the silt and the sandstorms and that kind of thing. And it was a little bit like Burning Man. We were looking for another venue, and one of our attendees actually came to us at the end of last year and said, I know this really cool little spot called Heartland Ranch, just outside of Kelowna. And Heartland it's right on the side of the hill. If you're heading out Highway 33, heading east from Kelowna on the way to Big White, it's right after the big hairpin turn, which is sometimes causes the highway to be shut down in the winter. But yeah, it's a really cool little spot. It's a big grassy field. It's right on a bench overlooking the river. They've got about, I think she said they've got 174 acres of property, which is massive. There's a little campsite right there. The property next to them, there's an outdoor adventure park, like with zip lines for the trees and stuff, which is really neat. Yeah, and it's got a great view of the sunset right where we'll have the campfire. It's a nice view over the valley looking out towards Kelowna. So yeah, we're really excited to be there. It's pretty cool to have that kind of a venue. And the owner is wonderful. She's a really nice lady. So yeah, we're stoked about it.
Now, my understanding is there's going to be no bugs, right?
July in Kelowna, hopefully all the bugs have been burned off by then. So yeah.
Exactly. I think a lot of people are really looking forward to this new location. Merritt definitely had its pluses. It's so close to town, and the river was right there, and constantly there was people soaking in the river, and that was a real high point for a lot of people. But yeah, it was a little tough with some of the wind and the sands. But I do have to thank you guys for keeping the event somewhere outside of the Lower Mainland. I know that the people from the Lower Mainland may not believe this, but it's not all about them. There is other people in the province, and there's a lot of people that are traveling down from Prince George or all over the Calgary and stuff like that. So I think trying to keep it as a sort of a central location, a lot of people really appreciate that because so much stuff does happen down to the coast, and it's nice to have something a little closer to home.
Oh yeah, and even if you're living in the Lower Mainland, it's pretty easy to get to Kelowna these days. The highway is in great shape. They finished all the construction, I think, or mostly finished the construction on the boat. So yeah, it should be pretty easy to blast up there. And that's also one of the reasons why we run the dates that we do. So rather than typical Friday, Saturday, Sunday event, we do Thursday. So Thursday afternoon through Sunday morning. And it definitely helps for people who are heading out of town. They don't have to sit in that terrible Friday gridlock for 2 hours trying to get from Vancouver to Hope. Yeah, you blast up on Thursday, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, on Sunday morning last year, we headed out, and there's a few of us that ended up going over towards Falkland through the Douglas Lake Ranch area, and just absolutely beautiful rolling grasslands and that. And there's probably a group of, I think it was about 4 or 5 of us, and then we ended up splitting at Falkland and going whether to Vernon or wherever. But it was a nice, easy rollout kind of idea. So it was definitely appreciated. So as you mentioned, it starts on the Thursday night or Thursday afternoon kind of idea. So a lot of people are rolling in on Thursday afternoon if they have the time off and that. And I guess your Thursday night basically consists of your first night around the fire kind of idea, right?
Yeah. So as people come in, vendors set up Thursday morning, attendees start coming in Thursday about lunchtime, and a chance to just get yourself settled and set your camping area up and meet your neighbors and have a beer and just relax for a bit. And then we have that first welcome campfire. We always have a fun speaker come in. And then we do our first, there's typically happy hour in there too, right? And then we have our first big campfire raffle of the event. And as you've mentioned before, the campfire raffles have gotten pretty legendary. So that's pretty cool.
Burn it, burn it. So that, if people don't know, if they pull a ticket and somebody's not there to take the prize, they basically put that ticket into the fire and pull another ticket. So you got to make sure you're there.
It's a lot of fun. You'll hear the shouting echoing sometimes. I'll be standing there at the campfire and I'll call a number and I'll say, going once, going twice. And next thing, there's 1,000 people in unison shouting, burn it. And then we always throw a few extra tickets in. So there's a few on, so we get a chance to burn a few tickets. But the fun thing is every time we do that, and we never know which one's going to be unclaimed. And so every time we do that, if the prize isn't claimed, we add to the prize. And there's been a couple of years there where we had 3 or 4, maybe 5 tickets unclaimed in a row. And by the time somebody collects their prize, if they're walking back to their campsite, it's like Santa Claus with a giant sack full of presents.
Yeah, I remember there's one, I think it was one, at least once throughout the weekend last year where it was 4 or 5 times, and it was just, these prizes just keep on coming, and everybody was getting excited about it. It was really neat to watch. Unfortunately, I didn't win last year, but that's not what it's all about. That sitting around that campfire, it's sitting around with some friends or some newfound friends. Every night last year, I was sitting with a different group of people, but also your speakers that you guys have at your campfire nights are absolutely incredible. You had Dan, the road chose me last year, as well as a couple of other the family that was traveling around the world, etc. And some of the speeches these people are talking about, and the fact that they're also talking with the people in the crowd, they're accepting questions from the crowd, and there's some really good questions from people. It was quite interesting.
It's funny because we've had some epic speakers, right? Like really well-known overlanders and industry people. Like we've had like Death to Glory and Overlanding the Americas, and people like Dan and Emily Miller came, and Scott Brady and Chris Collard, and just some really legendary people who've done amazing trips and who have so much to share. And they tell us that they love coming to the rallies because it's a venue where they can really interact with the people. It doesn't feel like they're standing in front of 5,000 people and they're giving a speech. That kind of feels like a TED Talk. Yeah. Whereas in a rally, so you're standing by the campfire, you've got people sitting around you in lawn chairs, and it feels like you're just having a conversation with people. And I think everybody who's come and spoken at the fire, they've said, anytime that we're back and you'd like to have us back, we'd love to come back because we've had so much fun. And of course, we know everybody too, right? So we have a lot of fun with them while they're up there. So we're not heckling them, but we do ask them pretty funny questions, which lead into some interesting stories of some of their trips and things like that. That's always a really good time.
I enjoyed last year the family that was up there that was going to travel around the world. I think they're heading down south or wherever they're heading, but there's a young daughter and a son, and they're talking about their experiences as children, and people are asking them questions, and you can just see how proud they were to be up there talking and answering those questions. And it just, I really enjoyed that one. That one really struck me for some reason.
It was fun because I was following that family on, I think it's called Rosie Tours the World or something. Rosie is the name of the fire truck that they converted into their motorhome.
Yep.
And so I followed them on Instagram, and one of my other friends who's come and spoken at the rallies, Lewis, actually last year, he was up and he was like teaching a caipirinha cocktail class, and I think making tacos and stuff. And they were both camping side by side, just randomly in Baja. They ran into each other on the beach, and I reached out to both of them. I said, "You guys are both at the rallies. You should go and talk to each other." So it was really fun. So
small world, eh?
It's a small world, and when you have people who travel a lot, especially people who travel for a significant period of time, they run into each other all the time, and it's great. You meet people, and you'll be traveling one direction, you'll meet somebody, and they'll say, "Oh, when you get to here, make sure you look up these people. They're really nice," and that's awesome. In all of the overland trips we've ever taken, one of the consistent things we found is that travelers that you meet, and not even just the travelers, the people you meet along the way, are so welcoming and sharing and happy to share information and guide you down the right path. And that's actually really rewarding. It's one of the things I think that we as a couple love the most about overland travel. You get to see a part of the country or a side of a culture that you wouldn't see if you just flew in and out. You get to visit the off the beaten tracks. And when you get into those areas, everybody's just super welcoming and super helpful.
Yeah, that's one thing I've really noticed about the overland community or the 4x4 community is that everybody is willing to help out. They'll jump in the instance when they can, and everybody's very welcoming. And half the time, you end up camping, and the people next to you invite you over for dinner and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
one of the things I love about it for sure.
It's funny, like when we think about when we travel to other places around North America or around the world, and we get to go to these little towns and meet these people, and it's so much fun. But if you think about somebody who's visiting BC, right, and if they fly into Vancouver for a holiday, and your typical tourist is going to see Vancouver and maybe Kelowna, and he's going to see all the hot spots. Your average person visiting Canada isn't going to be visiting like Quesnel and Revelstoke and 100 Mile House and all these cool little places where, we who travel around the province, we meet people in all of these little towns and we have a great time and we make new friends. And you can only have that experience when you're overland.
Yeah. And it's amazing how you keep in contact with these people over the years and you still make planned trips to go places with them. And the BC Overland Rally is a perfect example where there's a lot of people from around the province plan to meet their friends there, but they also plan to meet their friends, say up in Prince George or out in the Kootenays or whatever. They're planning these trips together, and that might be their one chance to see each other every year. But that kind of friendship never goes away.
Oh, yeah. I've met friends over the last dozen years that we've been doing the rallies that I've gone on just epic trips with. Yep. And places that I would have never known. But it'll be like I meet somebody at a show and this guy lives in Utah and this guy lives in Arizona and this guy lives in Pennsylvania. And we meet up and we go and explore these different areas. And we get to see parts of the state or parts of the province that we never would have found on our own. And that's really cool. And these are all people that we just met through the rallies, which is a ton of fun.
I got a little story actually from last year's rally, and I don't know if you heard it or not from Jordy Nielsen, but him and his wife went up to Alaska and for their holiday, and they're coming back down, and they live in West Kelowna, and the BC Overland Rally last year is going to be their last sort of stay before they go home and go back to work, etc. I guess 2-3 nights before they arrived there, they met a family that was traveling, and I think they're traveling from somewhere in the States, like Chicago or something like that. And they're like, "Hey, you going to the Overland Rally?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" So they said, "You got to follow us. Just come join us." And I met the family, and they were having so much fun. They never knew about the event up until a couple nights ago when Jordy and his wife mentioned it, but they were having so much fun, and they'd never been to something like that before, and they absolutely loved it. It was so cool to see.
Fantastic. No, I didn't hear that story. That's great to hear. Yeah, I love hearing how we have this community that pulls together. A couple of years ago, we had a couple of attendees coming down from Quesnel, I think, and hit a deer, and the truck was damaged. And we reached out through the Overland Rally Facebook community, and a bunch of people rallied together and got the vehicle fixed and got them to the show, and it was pretty epic. And last year, there was a guy whose Land Rover broke down on the top of a mountain, like seriously way, way up there. And a couple of people from the show, mechanics and rover enthusiasts and stuff, they jumped in their vehicles and they drove up to the top of the mountain one night, took the steer. So he had literally broken his steering rack in half and took the steering rack out of this Defender and brought it down the mountain and took it to a welder and left it there and gave him a ride to the show, and everybody enjoyed the show for the weekend. And then on Sunday, when the show was finished, they drove back up to the top of the mountain and put his truck back together, and everybody drove home. So yeah, it was a pretty epic story of everybody kind of pulling together to help.
No doubt. That is absolutely awesome. And that's what it's all about, right? It's this whole community. I often talk about it as if it's my chosen family, whether it's the overlanding or whatever you want to call it, or my off-road racing chosen family. That's basically my chosen family. So speaking about community, the Rebel Rally has become a really neat part of the BC Overland Rally. And maybe if you guys can mention a little bit about the Rebel Rally and who Emily is and what she brings to the BC Overland Rally, because she's quite the unique individual.
Yeah, I think most important fact to remember about the Rebel Rally is It is the longest, hardest, most technical off-road navigation-based rally in North America. And it is truly one of those very difficult rallies to complete. It's a multi-day course. It's in pretty inhospitable terrain. And it's going out and competing in the Rally de Gazelle or one of these epic ones that we have in Africa or South America. So yeah, it's the hardest and longest rally in North America. And it just happens to be for women only. And I think that's a really cool way of looking at it. It's not just a rally for women. It's the hardest rally you can do in North America. And it just happens to be women only. And I know a ton of guys who are competitive rally drivers who would love to do the Rebelle. I know one of them, I will wear a wig. And Emily was like, nope, sorry. But yeah, so it's a really cool race. And Emily's been fantastic. So Emily is a well-known record-setting rally driver herself. And then she decided to start this series up. Wow. A number of years ago. I can't remember when it started, but it's at least a half a dozen years, maybe more now.
Yeah, but, it's up there. It's probably 6 or 8 at least. Yeah,
and she had an interesting approach to it. Rather than it being, it's very competitive. Obviously, everybody who's in that race, they want to win. But the first thing you want to do is you want to complete the race, right? And finishing it, if you have a goal first year of actually completing the race, that's a pretty good target. Right? They typically recommend people who start the first year, don't be aiming to win this on your first year. But everybody works together. It's a pretty cool community. The racers and all the support staff kind of lift each other up. If somebody's struggling, people around them will help out rather than take advantage and shoot them down. It's a pretty empowering environment. And you have a lot of competitors who take part in that race who haven't really done a lot of this before, but they've heard about it. And they've heard it's a pretty epic challenge. And it's a navigation-based rally. So it's not necessarily you have to be the world's greatest off-road driver or you need to be like the world's greatest athlete. You need to be smart, right? You need to really use your head and figure out, okay, where am I going and how do I get there the most efficiently? And there's no GPS, right? You might as well have sextants. Like they make it super primitive and you really have to work at it. And it's pretty cool to see the way these teams come together. And very often you'll get teams made up of people who've never met each other before. Mm-hmm. Have somebody who's a driver and somebody who's a navigator, and they may not be able to find someone else who wants to compete with them. And so Emily will just randomly pick these people together and she'll go, okay, you guys are a team now. And they have all these courses and classes ahead of time where they learn the skills of navigation, they learn the driving skills. And it's pretty epic and intense driver training that they go through. They go through high-speed driving, they go through danger avoidance and navigation and getting your vehicle unstuck and technical terrain driving. They spend a couple of days just driving in the dunes, like they do a course just on sand dune driving. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. And then they have all these different classes, which is also pretty fun. So they've got like an electric vehicle class, they've got a classic old trucks class, and every other thing you could think of. It's pretty cool to watch. Yeah.
Definitely interesting. We've interviewed the Cantoy Divas twice. They're a team out of West Kelowna, and they've been doing it. I think they're into their 5th year or something like that now themselves. Yeah. And they actually found out about it at the BC Overland Rally, and they've become enthralled. This is their life kind of idea. They talk, eat, and sleep about it. And they are absolutely wonderful women. We've had them on twice. Most recently was back in, I think it was January or so. To our listeners, if you haven't listened to the episode with the Cantoy Divas, like saying it was early January when it came out, you got to go back and listen, because these ladies, not only are they so fun, but we talked a lot about the rally itself and the navigational challenges. There's no GPS, as you mentioned. And there's also you're stuck in a vehicle with somebody for 10 days kind of idea, which is not always easy to do. And they talked about Emily Miller and the history of rally. So definitely want to, recommend going back and listening to that, because it's just such a fun interview with these ladies. Now, for the first time ever, I believe they are doing one of their Rebelle University courses in BC this year, right?
It's interesting. Emily usually runs Rebel U in conjunction with the rallies every year, whether that's the one in Washington State or the one in BC. She'll come in, she'll do the Rebel U in both. And that's going to include driver training, navigation training, a lot of different courses. But this year, for the first time, she's actually doing competitive screening. So people are getting to compete. Now, I don't have the full details on it, but basically you have to be screened in order to be a competitor, right? Not just everybody can do it. You have to demonstrate that you're capable of doing it. Right. And so they're actually going to do that selection process in BC, and they're going to do it the day after the rally ends. So they're going to start up on the Sunday morning when we're all wrapping up. They're going to do that selection process at the rally site. I guess it's going to start there. It's probably going to go all over Greater Kelowna. But yeah, it's pretty cool that they're doing that there for the first time this year.
That's cool. That's really neat. One thing that we're definitely seeing an increase, and I don't know if just because people are paying more attention to it or if social media is out there more, but I feel that we're seeing an increase in women in overlanding. And not just as the passenger per se, but also as the drivers and doing solo trips and all that. I've got a number of female friends that they own their own vehicles and they're out exploring on their own in that. And I think that's absolutely wonderful to see. Marianne, you've been doing this exploring and overlanding for a long time. And how do you feel about the rise of the women? Are you seeing a lot more women yourself? Have you noticing that? Or is it just something that we're actually paying attention to more now?
No, I've seen more women wanting to overland. And definitely with regards to Rebel U at our rallies, a lot more women coming to the overland rallies, specifically because of definitely, I do see that there are more women wanting to overland.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, noticeable. That's one thing that my co-host Trish and I are really working on this year is to bring more women guests onto the show. And I think we're into March or the end of March, and we've already had, I think, 5 or 6 female guests already. And especially with having Trisha on board, it's been giving me a whole nother perspective and our listeners, a whole nother perspective that us as guys, especially me, grumpy old 50 whatever male driving a Tacoma, and she's a beautiful young lady driving a Jeep, and we're in different provinces, and it's definitely given us a different perspective, and I absolutely love seeing more women involved for sure. So
it's fun. The demographics are definitely expanding, and that's wonderful to see. For a little while there, I'd say maybe anywhere between 6 and 10 years ago, the Lion Tamer comment aside, we did have a stereotype of overlanders, right? And some of us like to call it the tactical look, right? And this is the guy who shows up and everything is blacked out and every piece of clothing is covered in Velcro, and it didn't have to be that serious, right? And now we're seeing more and more people embracing this. I think we're seeing a bit of a merger between what we used to call van life and overlanding, right? And it's more people just getting out there and having fun. And maybe you're not doing this epic trip across the Great Divide Pass or something, right? You can still have just as much fun driving up the Kettle Valley Railway route, right? And so I think we're seeing a lot more women getting in, but we're also seeing a lot of young people. We're seeing young families. We're seeing retired couples getting out there and enjoying this activity together. And it's fun because now I see them all merging. And so we've got friends who've been coming to the rallies for years. I've got a Lou who comes to the shows every year. He must be in his late 60s, I'm guessing. I hope I'm not telling tales out of school. But one of his best friends, and she came at his request. Like, he invited her to come to the shows last year. She shows up. She's got a cool Tacoma with a dirt bike on the back. She's full of energy. She's in her 20s, and they're best friends. And they, again, met on the trail, met overland, right? And we're seeing all this great merging of demographics. And it's really wonderful to see. Yeah.
And even cultures too. I've really noticed we're starting to see a lot of different people from different ethnic backgrounds out there. And a lot of people that I know are from different ethnic backgrounds, whether they're born in Canada or not. And that is something that I love seeing out. And I'm learning a lot of stuff too. There's somebody posted something up on Facebook a while ago about cooking pineapple over the campfire. And I'm like, what is this all about? They're roasting a full pork pig in the background, but I was focused on the pineapple that's cooking complete, whole, not cut up, but on top of the campfire. What's this all about? She said, this is something that we do with our Brazilian background. And she told me a bit about it. And I guess it takes the sugar and just makes it so sweet. And apparently it's absolutely incredible. I've got a pineapple sitting in my fridge that's going camping with me tomorrow night because we're going to try this. So it's just so neat. So many different cultures bringing their culture into the camping as well, too. So
I love the fact that we walk around the camping area at the rallies and we hear so many languages now. We meet so many people with different backgrounds. And it's such a sharing environment that you just walk up to any campfire and you say hi, and everybody invites you in and offers you a beer and offers you some food. And there are groups who will recognize themselves when I mention it on your podcast. But like, there's one big group who's been coming forever. And every year at the rally, there will be one night where they do this Uzbekistani pilaf dish, and it's massive. And it's this huge pot cooked over the fire, and it's got lamb and rice and everything in it.
Oh, man.
Feed 40 people. Yeah. And everybody knows, and everybody comes by and has a little plate and enjoys it. And then there's another group that we love to see, and you walk by and they're doing authentic Korean barbecue.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool experience. Yeah, we really love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, me too. It's something that so happy to see this. For the longest time, the 4x4 community was not always as opening and welcoming as it is now. And it's incredible. Hopping over to, we mentioned earlier about some of the courses and demonstrations that you guys have. And I briefly mentioned it with the Rebel Rally, how I took one of the mapping courses. But there's quite a few other courses throughout the event. I attended the solar panel one. I attended a lithium battery one because working on getting my solar panels for my vehicle and wanting to learn. And that is one of the things of the BC Overland Rally, is that there's so much to learn there as well, if you want to learn, right?
Yeah, I think the classes that we have, there's obviously a lot of driving and recovery classes, and those are always entertaining and well attended. But some of them can be pretty obscure, right? It can be like, how do you effectively use this particular design of pulley block? Or one of my favorite ones is high lift, like a high lift jack class. And people are like, okay, that's cool. You can jack your truck up, or you can use it as a winch if you want to. But when you start to get into it, you can actually do a lot of cool stuff with a high lift jack. I always like to say the bad thing about the high lift jack is you jack your truck up really high and there's a good chance it's going to tip over. But the good thing about the high lift jack is when you need it to, you can jack your truck up and you can just push it over. And there's all these different tools and things in the arsenal that we sometimes don't realize we can use and leverage. And there's a lot of really smart people out there who have generations of knowledge to share. And that's actually one of the things that I really enjoy about the way we engage people to work with us to do training. Yeah, we have the professional trainers, right? So we have the Overland Canada, and we have Arc Off-Road, and we have the different professionals that we know, and Richard from Freedom Recovery. And these people are legendary in our community, and they have so much knowledge to share. But then we have guys who are like, this is a trick that my granddad taught me. And you'll do a little class on it, using a spare tire to leverage your winch line up so you can pop a truck up and out of a rut, or using that spare tire to winch yourself sideways when you need to without pulling your wheel off the rim. Like little tips and techniques and things like that. It's passed down from father to son. It's not something that's typically taught in a class, but it's a really cool tool to have in your toolbox. It's another, as they say, another arrow in the quiver. And it's fun having an ability and a forum for people to share that knowledge. That's really cool.
I found there's so much in the courses, but there's also so much that I learned just walking around and looking at other people's vehicles and how they've outfitted their vehicles. And there's so many different vehicles there. There's everything from an Isuzu Trooper right up to those great big man-style trucks kind of idea. And there's just so much to learn from that as well, too, just walking around the campgrounds and talking to people. And I found that was probably one of the most interesting things about the rally as well.
Oh, yeah. And the fact that there's no vehicle shaming. We had a couple who showed up one time in a little Triumph TR7 convertible. You remember the TR7, the one looks like a little wedge, right? With two little folding chairs and a tent in the trunk. And they showed up and they camped on the field next to all these great big lifted trucks and stuff. And they were driving that thing to Panama. It was epic.
Wow.
And so it's not about what you have. It's about just using what you have and having fun with it, right? People always say to me, okay, Ray, you've got 8 or 9 Land Rovers and all these other cool trucks. And I do have a bit of a truck addiction. And they're like, when you guys go camping or you guys go on a cool trip, what do you typically take? What's your favorite vehicle? And I'm like, I like this vehicle for this, and I like this vehicle for this. But if I'm traveling with Marianne, her favorite vehicle for us to do a trip in is her little 1990 Toyota Corolla station wagon. And it's a fun little car, and it gets great gas mileage, and it goes everywhere. It's like a little billy goat. And my kids have taken that thing up to the top of every mountain around the Fraser Valley, I think. But yeah, it's all about just having fun with the vehicle you have. And that's always cool to see. So yeah, walking through the camping area and looking at some of the vehicles is a ton of fun.
And the vendor section is a lot of fun as well, too. There's lots of great vendors ranging from, like we mentioned, anywhere from overland groups or overland companies, Overland Garage, to the recovery gear from Freedom Off-Road, and Capit had a huge display. And there's all kinds of gear for overland. There's all kinds of great resellers of equipment as well as manufacturers of equipment there. I don't want to start naming things because I know I'm missing people. There's a lot of really great vendors there. But one of the things that I noticed with the vendors is, we mentioned it off air, is how it's just even themselves, they're in competition with each other, but they're still friendly and they're still sitting around the campfire at night. And you might have 2 competitors sitting there side by side, sharing a beer and laughing and stuff like that. And that brings that whole community thing that we're talking about earlier. But definitely worth going and checking out the vendors area if you're going there. It's definitely a fun time. I am going back to the rally this year, as we have been talking off air about. And this year, I'm definitely going to be wearing a 4x4 Canada podcast shirt. And so people know that I'm there. And I want to do more interviews with the vendors as well, and work for a couple of YouTube videos and social media now, but also around the campsites too. So to our listeners, if you see some guy wandering around in the 4x4 Canada podcast shirt, that's probably me. And I'm going to throw some decals on my vehicle so you can spot my vehicle. But I will be wandering around the campsites and talking to people, and as well as the vendors as well. So if you do happen to see me, don't be scared to say hi. There's a lot of people I found out were there last year. They're like, oh, I didn't know you were there. And it's okay, I got to make myself a bit more visible. So I will be wearing the apparel and go from there. So let's talk a little bit about your other event, the Northwest Overland Rally.
Yeah, so the Northwest Overland Rally has been going for about 12 years now. Same idea, same basic concept. Everybody comes Thursday through Sunday. We have the big campfire and we have all the classes. It's in Leavenworth, Washington, actually in the little tiny town called Plain, which is just outside Leavenworth. The very first year of that show was in Ellensburg, Washington. And it was a poor choice of venue, and there was a flood, and there was a lot of issues. And I was driving home to BC, and there was a huge accident on the highway heading back towards Seattle. And I had the VHF radio in my truck, and I was talking to some of the truckers, and they were like 10 miles ahead, saying, yeah, we're still sitting in this. And so it looked like we are going to be there all weekend. And I looked around and I didn't see any boys in blue anywhere around. So I put it into 4 low and I drove off the side of the highway and down the embankment into the trees and rolled through the trees until I found a little road. And that road led me to a bigger road. And the next thing I know, I'm on this cool little road through the hills in Washington State. And I come around a corner and I was like, holy cow, I'm in Bavaria. How did this happen? And if you've never been to Leavenworth, it used to be a logging community that ran out of logs, or the mill closed or something back in the 70s. And they had a contest as a town to say, what can we do to keep this town alive and attract some tourism? And they call that area of Washington State the Washington Alps. And so it's beautiful mountains and streams and rivers everywhere. And so they decided they would transform the town into a Bavarian hamlet in the Washington Alps. And you drive through the town and you swear you're in like every house or business looks like it's a little gingerbread house kind of thing. It's like something from Hansel and Gretel. And it is so much fun. And on weekends, you've got bands out there and doing yodeling and wearing lederhosen. And it's pretty epic. So I said, if we're talking about overlanding and we don't want to go too far, like I just drove down the road and I'm in Germany. So we moved the rally in the second year to Leavenworth. And we've been there ever since. We've been having a ton of fun. It's a cool little town. But of course, the most important thing is just getting all the people together, right? It's such a cool area that people come from all over the Pacific Northwest. And
including BC. There's a number of people that come from BC down to that rally as well, too.
California and from the Yukon and from Alberta, all over the place come to that, including vendors. Like we have vendors who come to that show from Saskatchewan and from Arizona. And yes, we had, I think, somebody from Georgia, like Atlanta, Georgia, came all the way out to be at the show. Although we had Quigley Outdoors came to the BC show last year, and they were from the East Coast of the States. That's a pretty big drive.
It's a long haul.
But I think one of the cool things, one of the reasons the vendors like to come back is we have an interesting approach with vendors. We charge probably 1/10 of what a vendor would typically pay for a booth of that size at a show like ours. And the vendors typically say, Ray, are you sure? Because we're happy to pay more if you want to charge us more for the booth space. And we say, no, what we want you to do is we want you to take that money that you would have spent on your booth, and we want you to spend it on the experience for the attendees. And so the vendors, that's part of the deal. When you sign up for a vendor booth, there's an expectation that you're going to do something cool for the attendees. And that can be making Bloody Marys on Saturday morning for 1,000 people on the campsite. That can be teaching a class. That can be leading a trail run. It can be, we had a Dragonfly Tents. One of the owners of Dragonfly Tents, she teaches ukulele classes every year at the shows for all the kids. They all show up, and she shows up with a van full of ukuleles, and she teaches ukulele classes every evening for these kids. And they always do a little performance on the last night. It's awesome, right?
Nice.
And then obviously a lot of vendors, they don't have the bandwidth to run a bunch of stuff, or maybe they're not comfortable running a bunch of stuff. And they look at what can we do to support the rallies, and they bring absolutely amazing campfire prizes. Mm-hmm. And that's where the whole campfire raffle came from. So if you show up at the show, every night you bring your lawn chair to the campfire, and we have a bunch of volunteers. They run around and they give everybody a ticket. And you get a new ticket every night. Doesn't matter who you are. Kids get tickets. Little babies get tickets. Everybody gets a ticket. Dogs don't get tickets, but everybody else gets a ticket. and it's free, right? It's just included with the price. And people are like, oh, what am I going to get? Maybe I'll get a t-shirt or something. And we give away sets of tires. We give away winches. We give away rooftop tents. Last year, the year before, there's a little 9-year-old girl and she won like a $5,000 rooftop tent. She was pretty happy. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We really enjoy that. But it all comes down to this kind of unspoken contract we have with the vendors that, yeah, we recognize you're getting a pretty good deal, but what we want you to do is give back to the show and give back to the attendees. And honestly, our vendors have stepped up. They've been amazing. And the first year you'll get a vendor, he goes, you want me to do what? And I'm like, look, there's no pressure. If you're not comfortable teaching a class, you want to give something away, that's cool. If you can't afford to give something away, that's also cool. We have a lot of little mom and pop shops, right? Mm-hmm. Come to the rallies because it's affordable. They can't afford to go to some of the big shows. But for $500 or whatever it is, they can, and then sometimes they'll share a booth with somebody if they only have like, all I need is a 10-foot table, man. And we'll connect them with some other little tiny vendors. And so they give as much or as little as they want to, and they contribute as much or as little as they want to. But really, they all step up, especially after the first year. And they have so much fun with it. We'll have a vendor who comes the first night or the first year, and they'll say, okay, yeah, you said we needed to contribute. And we figured we knew what that meant. And then we look at how much fun the vendors on either side of us are having, interacting with these people and building this community. And some of their interactions become legendary. They become part of the rally itself. Al Smith, who used to own Overland Kitchen, started this thing called a whiskey sharing hour. And you had to show, and he printed little glasses, and everybody who came got a little souvenir glass. Al loves whiskey, right? And he would show up and he'd have a couple of bottles of whiskey that he would find on his travels. And the idea was it didn't have to be the most expensive whiskey. It just had to be like a whiskey that spoke to you. It could have been, this is the whiskey my grandfather used to sip when I'd visit him, right? It could be, we went on this trip to Montreal and we found this crazy maple syrup whiskey and it's terrible, but we brought it back anyway so everybody can see how terrible it is. Everybody stands up there, and everybody who goes to that little session, you have to stand up in front of the crowd with your bottle of whiskey, and you have to speak to the crowd and tell them why this particular bottle of whiskey is special to you. And then everybody gets a little tiny taste. And everybody kind of comments on it, and then it goes on to the next person. And it started out as a little thing. And over the course of 4 or 5 years, it's become epic. And suddenly you've got like 100 people showing up with whiskey bottles who want to start telling their stories. And it's gone from like a 1 hour thing to 2 or 3 hour thing. And we've had to say, okay, everybody, like, make sure you're pouring very, very small. Like little things like that, right? They have a life of their own. The vendors who get it, they really get it. And they have a ton of fun with it. Last year, Mason from Cabot and his brother, they were like, hey, we're going to do blueberry pancake breakfast one day. Anybody who wants to come by our booth, we'll do some blueberry pancakes. And we're like, okay, that's cool. And I'm like, you sure? He goes, yeah, that's cool. He says, we've got a bunch of these camp kitchens that we sell, and it'll be a cool way of showing people what they can do. And a couple hours later, I walk over to the Cabot booth, and Mason is standing there, and sweat's running off his face, and he can barely lift his spatula. And I said, how's it going? He goes, Ray, I think I've served about 2,000 pancakes this morning. He goes, I never want to look at another pancake again. But I'm going to do it again this year. It's like when a woman has a baby, she's never again. And then the next year, she's okay, yeah, maybe one more.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Mason, I think he may go back into it again this year. But little things like that, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was in those lineups for the pancakes both days, and standing in the lineup is half the fun too, whether you're with your friends or you're meeting other people or you're standing there eating your pancake after you've already been served it and stuff like that. So I do want to mention one thing to our listeners, that if you do win a prize, please go to the effort of thanking the vendor, because it does go a long way. I've done stuff where I've donated through work before, and just that little thank you from that person, it goes to mean a lot. I mean, even if it's just a hat or a shirt. There was a friend of mine, it's actually a girl, that won a prize last year, and I was sitting behind the people that donated the prize, and she was screaming up there. She didn't know what she won. I think it was a shirt and a hat or something like that. But she was just so excited, and she ran up there, and then she saw what it was, and she's, I got a hat, I got a shirt, and she's just jumping up and down. And the people that donated it, and they're sitting in front of me, they loved it so much. It was just, they're like so happy that she was just so happy to get something that they donated.
And it's funny. It's completely random, the raffle.
Mm-hmm.
But we always like to joke. It's like the most dangerous prizes seem to go to little kids. And so it's like, okay, we're giving away a machete or a hatchet or a BB gun or something. And sure enough, a 4-year-old is going to win this. We always make sure that we have a little bit of fun with it. I remember last year I gave an axe to a little kid, and I said, okay, hold this above your head and run as fast as you can through the crowd. Seeing the crowd parting like the Red Sea. It was awesome.
And that's what it's all about, right? It's having fun, for sure. You and I both have some mutual friends, Bill and Tricia. I grew up with Bill. Yeah, our families were very close. And so I grew up with Bill, and we stayed in contact throughout the years. But yeah, as Bill and Tricia are now living down in Baja, Mexico, and they keep on bugging me to come down and visit them. So I think I definitely have to make that trip down one day. And they're great people, and I know they'll show me around. And I know Tricia will feed me more than I can eat.
Yeah, Tricia, whenever they're in town, when it's a rally weekend, I usually lean on Trish to come and teach a cooking class. And she's pretty fantastic at it. And that's always a lot of fun. Yeah.
I was totally surprised last year when I was sitting in the lineup for free beer on the Friday night or Thursday night or whatever it was. And I happened to see Bill standing there because I didn't realize that they were back up. So
Right.
it was really neat spending quite a bit of time with Bill and Trish at the rally last year. That's probably actually one of my favorite things was spending some time with them because I hadn't seen them in a couple of years. But that's what the rally is all about, is meeting up with these old friends you haven't seen for a while and sitting there chatting and having a beer or sitting around the fire or whatever. That's what it's all about.
We've met so many fun people that we never would have met any other way. Who live in different cities, who work in different industries. The chances of our paths ever crossing are so remote. And yet we've met through the rallies and we've seen each other every year for a couple of years. And now we're like lifelong friends. And that's pretty awesome.
Once again, we are chatting with Ray and Marianne from the BC Overland Rally. You can check them out at overlandadventurerallies.com and, of course, BC Overland Rally on Facebook and Instagram. Really looking forward to the BC Overland Rally coming up in Kelowna this year, guys. Really looking forward to this new location. And I think there's going to be a lot of people returning. And like I say, it's all about seeing old friends and meeting new friends. Really looking forward to it. I want to thank you guys for taking the time tonight to chat. I know that we could talk for hours, right? You guys have such an interesting history, and I love hearing about your expeditions and love hearing about the rally, both the BC one and the Washington one. And definitely recommend people check out the Washington one as well. And it's one of the things that I think I really like about your rally compared to some of the real big ones in the States is that it's all about the people, right? Some of the bigger ones, I have friends that have gone to some of the bigger ones in the States, and they're like, you're walking around on the days for a couple of days kind of idea. And whereas your rallies, there's still a lot of people there, but it's all about the people.
Yeah, and we try to make sure that it's accessible for people. So one of the things with the rallies is, as we know from having a family, it can be expensive to go and do things when you've got a bunch of kids, right?
Yep.
Instead of buying 2 tickets on an airplane, you're buying 5 tickets, right? Everything gets so expensive so quickly. And camping and overlanding are one of those, the last things that you can do with a family where you're not paying any extra, right?
Yep.
Everybody gets in the truck. Let's all go, right? And so we do the same thing at the rallies. We make sure that anybody under 19 gets in free. So if you've got 2 or 3 teenagers, and they don't even need to be your teenagers, right? Like if you've got a couple of kids and they want to bring a couple of their school friends, as long as they've got a parental permission slip, they can all get in free. And so I want to recognize that for a lot of families, going camping and getting out there and having that experience is one of the last really affordable things we can do. And so, yeah, we definitely do that at both of the shows. And it's been awesome being able to see all these kids grow up over the last half a dozen or dozen years.
Yeah.
Right? There's a girl that I know, I think she started coming when she was 12, maybe. And I think she learned how to drive on our technical course with some of our instructors. And then, I think when she turned 20, she bought a 4Runner and she drove to Baja on her own. Right, using all the skills that she learned at the rallies over the years, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not worried about this. I got this." And off she went. And she had an epic time. So, yeah, that's actually been really cool. Yeah,
that's definitely neat watching these kids grow for sure. So, that is so cool. One of the last questions that we ask all of our guests on the Before Canada podcast is, "What Canadian would you like to listen to on the podcast?"
I think one of our favorite couples, and they've come to our shows a few times, is Richard and Ashley Giordano from the Dust to Glory. And they are so much fun. They're such a sweet couple. They came to our Northwest show before their very first trip. And they were like a couple of kids with an old red little Toyota pickup truck from the 80s. Yeah. And they're like, "We're going to drive to Panama." And we're like, "Okay." And off they went, and they had a fantastic time. They had such a great trip. Now they've traveled all over the world. Ashley does amazing work for Overland Journal now. They're currently driving across Morocco, I think, the last time I saw them. And Richard has been working with the Expedition Overland team, filming in Africa. And their story is so inspiring. And yeah, they're a young couple from BC, and they're super sweet and fun to talk to. Yeah, I think they'd be awesome guests.
I agree 100% with you. I've been following them for a number of years, and just their story, like you mentioned, taking this stock Toyota down all through South America, and it's just absolutely incredible. And now they've upsized to a Tundra, and they're like, say, driving around, I think you're right, around Morocco right now. And yeah, everything I've seen about them is a really nice couple, but I find them quite inspirational, right? They had a dream and they went for it, and they're living it. And they've gained other experiences with other organizations and that throughout their time, and they're having an absolute blast traveling the world. So definitely want to get a hold of them for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they've got that camper of theirs made in Edmonton. It's now been around the world, and it's going strong. So yeah, nice to see.
Yeah. How about you, Marianne? Have you got any other thoughts too?
Oh, family, YOLO. The husband's name is Juve. The wife is Margie, and they've got 2 kids. And I think they've definitely got great stories to tell. They did they do Europe and are doing South America now, or is it the other way around?
No, yeah, I think so. I think
they did Europe, and then they're doing South America now. And last year that they
left from the show.
They left from the show.
Yep.
They came to the rally, and they gave a little talk, and the kids gave a cool talk about overlanding as kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then they jumped in their little Sprinter van and they drove to South America.
Yeah.
So that'd be a fun one.
I found their talk quite inspiring, partially because of the kids, how well the kids were talking, and people were asking them questions. It's one thing to be traveling around as a couple or as a solo overlander, but as you are well aware of, you bring kids into that, and that's a whole nother ball game. But that experience for those kids, that has got to be incredible. Oh, traveling around the world as a kid, I cannot imagine that, right? But definitely want to talk to them. Another great suggestion as well, too. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I really want to thank you guys for coming out. BC Overland Rally is July 11th to 14th in Kelowna. It's going to be a really great show, and I'm really looking forward to it. And to our listeners, check it out. And if you happen to see some guy with a white beard wandering around with the 4x4 Canada podcast, don't be scared to say hi. We were going to have to plan a little get together with some of the 4x4 Canada podcast listeners, a little get together one night there and sit around the propane fire pit and go from there. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so much for having us on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys. I agree. It's been a lot of fun. So
thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. And we will chat soon.
All right. Thanks. Take care.
Take care.